jockey, drop the bass. Now the heads.
Oh, America.
You fat, bloated idiot in the world. You stupid.
Well, I got this one wrong, but only slightly. I expected that it would go to Clinton, but by a very, very tiny weeny margin, and would scare the shit out of everyone. But what actually happened was that Trump won. Not by much, though it seems that he's going to carry the popular vote as well. So keep that in mind. When you say he's not your president, he doesn't speak for you, he does appear to actually speak for the country, and not on a single issue, and not on a non-binding referendum. This was the really real world, and this was a proper election, and it's binding, and Trump, against what anyone would have thought back when this started, is actually your president. Well, there you go. Just goes to show things aren't predictable. I figured he was in for an outside chance. I didn't completely write him off. But I think, like most people, I expected Clinton. I didn't expect it to be a walkover for her. She was the wrong candidate at the wrong time. Completely. She's a terrible candidate. They're both terrible candidates. But people just weren't buying the lesser evil anymore. They didn't want to vote Saruman. They thought, if we're going to vote evil, we might as well go full Sauron. And that's what they did. So how the fuck does someone like Donald Trump win the US presidency? There's a lot of reasons, and they make a lot of sense when you think about it. I think the primary reason for his success is the failure of the Democratic Party in the States. I don't think it's so much to do with what Trump has said and done. I think it's much more to do with what the Democratic Party has said and done. So the main thing I think that went against them was their candidate. Hillary Clinton is just fucking terrible as a candidate. And more to the point, the atmosphere, the way the world is at the moment, the way the US at the moment is, the way the whole context of this election is, this was always going to be a radical battle. And Clinton is the establishment candidate. So she was always going to be under serious threat from anyone that was an outsider or a radical or different or outside of that political machine with which people have lost so much faith and so much trust. So she was absolutely the worst person you could have put up against Donald Trump. Bernie's looking pretty good about now in hindsight, isn't he? Isn't he really? Isn't he just? And he tested incredibly well in all the demographic sections in which Trump did well. So if you really wanted to contest Trump, if you'd taken him seriously as an opponent, you would have put Bernie forwards. But no, it was her time, and God, how arrogant was that? To ride it all on, they'll want another historic moment after the first black president, and thinking that a vagina was a qualification for government. And all the other stuff that you would think would make her qualified, her experience, her position, everything, all worked against her, because this was an anti-establishment radical election, and you shit-canned the radical anti-establishment candidate from your own party. In fact, you conspired against him, as has been released, has been shown in all these leaks and everything. You worked so damn hard against your own best candidate, and you reap what you sow, I'm afraid. Turnout was up. Now that can go either way, but it appears that a large chunk of that turnout was people who don't normally vote, who came out to vote for Trump. But what's especially interesting about this is an observation. I can't remember where I saw it, but it seems to be being borne out as true, in that in this election, a lot of working and lower middle class white people voted the same kind of way that the black vote does, or the Latino vote does. That is, that they came out and they voted along the lines of identitarian politics. Now, there's a bunch of reasons why this might have happened. Probably get into that in a bit, but isn't that interesting in that all this identity politics has been pushed to the point at which, you know, a large section of the white populace in the US has now taken on board these identitarian politics and has decided to vote, consciously or unconsciously, has decided to vote along those lines with the same kind of homogenous block vote that you normally see in ethnic minorities. That's scary. Identity politics is already scary. You should be voting on politics, not the colour of someone's skin or because everyone else is voting the same way that you do. But that's a huge own goal for identity politics if it's gotten to the point where white, lower and middle class Americans now feel so besieged, so fed up with being blamed for everything, and have taken on board these ideas of racial and cultural identity to such a degree that they're now acting as we expect other racial and cultural groups to do so, and that is voting as a bloc for what they perceive to be their best interests. It's not good when anybody does it, and it's not good now either, but it's interesting. Very interesting. Oh, and it bears pointing out that, you know, appealing to minorities in order to try and win an election isn't a very wise policy, because you need a majority in order to win. You know, there just aren't that many transgender voters. You know, maybe if you'd taken maths instead of gender studies or African American studies, you'd know that. Now, another huge factor in all this was, of course, the media. Now, the media's been declining in its effect due to the rise of the internet and due to the lack of trust that people now have for most mainstream media sources. But even so, it can't be ignored as a factor, and the fact is that Trump ruled the airwaves. Every controversy gave him free coverage and exposure. Nobody was taking him seriously to start with, which worked hugely in his favour. And he's got the televisual experience. He was able to deliver sound bites, and while neither he nor Clinton are very good public speakers, he was at least entertaining to watch, and that will take you a long way, unfortunately, far more than substance, unfortunately. So there was that problem, and the bias in the media became more and more explicit and obvious as time went on, and that turned more and more people off and created less and less trust. At the same time, you've got the alternative news sources and so on, people relying on their friendship groups and trust groups online, and that tends to lead to insularity on both the left and the right. And I'm always somewhere kind of in the middle. I try to maintain as many different links on different sides of the political spectrum as I can, but there are obnoxious retards on both sides. Whether it's the regressive left on the left or the racist alt-right on the right, there are horrible people. But both these groups are kind of in their own little bubbles. And the left-hand group, the left side group, tends to be much more insular and much smaller than I think they realise. Whereas the right-hand side group, that hard line is definitely as small and as isolated as the left. But the obnoxiousness in society has so much more been coming from the left. I think there's a lot of people that have been pushed to the... Okay, here's the main thing that I think has driven both Trump and over here has driven Brexit. There are a lot of people that have been ignored by the political establishment for a very long time. They have been left out, marginalised, ignored, and on both sides of the Atlantic, this is primarily the white underclass, lower class, and lower middle class, and a lot of men as well. Their jobs have been under attack, there's been no help for them. A lot of help that goes into poor communities is very racially oriented, or a lot of help's available to women that isn't available to men. It's less of a factor than I think many people would think it is, but I think the regressive left does have a part to play in this, in demonizing these people, and making them feel ignored and angry and hostile, and making them feel lectured to. And while they talk about getting them to educate themselves, there's no effort made to actually educate. And I don't mean, by educate, I don't mean lecture, I mean persuade, I mean show the evidence, present an alternative case. These people have been ignored by the left. They are completely detached from and divorced from the modern left. The left wing has abrogated all of its responsibility and ideological attachment to the working class, to their needs, to their politics, to any of that. The modern left is completely alien to its working class roots. And that leaves a void. And nature abhors a vacuum. And right-wing populists have come into this area, and in lieu of laying blame where it should be laid, which is upon accumulation of wealth in the 1%, structural inequalities in society and ways to address them that aren't just handouts and so on, instead we have right-wing politicians who will blame race, will blame immigrants, will blame internationalism and globalism, all of these things which actually can and often do help the poor globally, if not necessarily nationally. And solutions from the left, genuine solutions to these problems that people in these areas do face. Genuine solutions exist, but they're not being offered. Nobody cares about these people anymore. And so they seem to have finally snapped, both sides of the Atlantic. And the worst part of this, both sides of the Atlantic, is that in both cases it's turkeys voting for Christmas. Because the people who are going to be absolutely the worst affected by both the Trump presidency and by Brexit are going to be the very people who in the majority voted for it. This disenfranchised, under-assisted, primarily white working and middle class. These are the people who are going to lose out the most through the lack of social investment, the rollback of policies that have helped people in these positions. These are the people that are going to be most affected, most hard done by everything that's going on in these instances. But it's already set up to blame things like immigration or whatever. There's always somebody else to blame. Even freckled people, as I think they went with Nemesis the Warlock once they stopped blaming aliens. There's always someone else to blame. It's never your fault. It's never the problem with your policies or ideas. There's always saboteurs or the enemy or people blocking you, so we must make political reforms in order to overcome them. I don't think that's particularly likely to happen in this instance, those darker aspects, but people are definitely going to be hurt. And most of them are going to be the ones who voted for it. And that's unfortunate for them, I guess. They felt like they had nothing more to lose. They were wrong. There's one other thing I want to touch on before I shift topics here. And that is that this American election learned absolutely nothing from Brexit. A big problem we have had during the campaigning and afterwards is this kind of arrogant upper middle class intelligentsia, media lovey, looking down on the people that voted for Brexit. Now, I think it was a profoundly stupid decision. I think people have voted against themselves in both cases here. But I think something we should have learned from Brexit is that insulting people, calling them racist or sexist in the case of Clinton, misogynist pigs, calling them idiots and so on, doesn't work. Like I was just saying, you need to make your case to these people, and you need to do it in a persuasive way. They're not idiots. Some of them might be ignorant in the proper sense of the word, in that they don't know what's going on. Many of them lacked the expertise in the case of the Brexit decision to know what they were actually voting about. Many of them made protest votes and so on. But these are all things that can be tackled without demonising and othering people. But apparently that lesson wasn't learned, because the Clinton campaign is very much the whole basket of deplorables, all the rest of it. But that just energized and created a kind of perverse sense of pride in the people who were against her, in the same way it has created that same kind of thing over here with the Brexiteers. This isn't a tactic that works. And American didn't learn from us. And lo and behold, in the wake of Trump's victory, I go and look on Twitter thinking, maybe this has woken a few people up that this isn't going to work. Maybe this is going to have humbled a few of them. Maybe they'll see that there's another approach, an approach of persuasion, of making a case, of reaching out to these people, of not just demonizing them. But it turns out that social justice Twitter is all like,
I didn't learn anything. I was right all along.
I wouldn't panic too much just yet, for a few reasons. Okay, Supreme Court, that's a worry. You're definitely going to get a conservative judge in, but you coped with Scalia. But I would, have 24-hour paramedics, iron lungs, whatever it takes to keep the rest of them alive for 4 years. Because I think he's going to be a one-termer. Why do I think that? Well, Trump is a populist windsock. He hasn't really had any policies. That's part of the reason he's won. One I missed in the earlier section is that he is basically a tabula rasa, a blank slate onto which people can project whatever they want. That's going to lead to a lot of bad shit, because every redneck racist piece of shit out there, and there aren't as many of them as you're probably worried about, but they're going to feel empowered by him. They're going to feel that he speaks for them, that now the country is on their side again, and that's what's going to cause you the big issues, I think. Policy-wise, governments have a lot of inertia, and you've got 8 years of liberalisation which needs to be slowed and stopped before it can be turned back around the other way. Even though Republicans now control everything, Trump is still likely to receive a lot of resistance because he pissed off the establishment so badly. A lot of them are going to want to get in his way. And a lot of Democrats have built him up to be the devil, and so they're going to feel licensed and able to pull all the same kind of shitty tactics the Republicans have been pulling on them throughout the Obama presidency and before. So I expect you'll see a lot of filibustering and bullshit and impeachment proceedings and so on further down the line. That last one may be a bad idea, and it's also why do not assassinate Donald Trump. Okay? Pence is a creationist and a dominionist. So long as Trump's there, you're relatively okay. Relatively. Trump is survivable, I think. Pence, not so much. So please, I'm begging you, do not assassinate Donald Trump. Okay? Good. So I don't think he's going to be able to push through what few policies he did have. I don't know what's going on. Someone is going to be pulling the strings behind his back, and I doubt he'll be able to push through very much of his agenda. He's got to turn the whole thing around to even try, and I think a lot of shit is going to be in his way. Not least of all, the Republican Party, because they do not like him. I don't see a lot of these burnt bridges being repaired. Maybe some people will come back around him, hoping for a whiff of power, sniffing the barmaid's apron because they can't afford any more beer. But you may see other kinds of shifts. It's impossible to predict at this point, but I do predict that a lot of Trump's agenda will never see the light of day, will never get anywhere, at least so long as he's restricted to one term. You'll see a new counterculture come up. We always get a vibrant, interesting counterculture whenever something horrible is in charge. Under Thatcher, Britain was Britain's artistic and musical culture was fucking amazing. Under Bush, there was a lot of resistance, and a lot of comedians really made a lot of ground off of Bush. I think similarly, Trump is going to be brilliant fodder for culture jammers, artists, musicians, poets, writers, whatever else. You're going to have a really interesting and vibrant counterculture for the next 4 years. So that's a silver lining, I suppose. Hopefully, though I have my doubts, this will lead to some kind of restructuring on both the left and right, which is actually the right and further right, of American politics. Maybe we'll see some shift. Maybe the Democrats at least will understand that they now need to redress the balance. They need to readdress the people that they have been ignoring and riding roughshod over and treating like shit for a very long time. Hopefully. I'm not holding out that much hope watching people freak out on social media and saying, oh, white people are terrible, when it's the white people that you need to appeal to try and bring this back around. You need to convince them of your points of view. And hopefully that's what will happen. We'll start to see some genuine political alternatives come around. I hope that what started with Bernie Sanders will continue and grow in its grip. Maybe people will see that that's the way forward for the American left, such as it is, to be more radical, to be more populist, to be more socially democratic. Hopefully, because that's what it's going to take to fight these battles. I think you need to find some way to bring these ideas to and appeal to this big, obviously powerful group of disenfranchised, disaffected voters who have just delivered a massive fuck you, as Michael Moore put it. Hopefully that's what's going to happen. This is your chance to restructure and push back, because there is no way Trump can please all the people he has promised to please. There is no way he can pull off half these policies. There's no way he's not going to disappoint vast swathes of people in a similar way, but worse, to the way in which Obama did. So be ready to exploit that in 4 years' time. Okay, if you really want to make a difference over the next 4 years, here's what you need to do. You need to reorganize, you need to refine your left-wing values, you need to build on what Bernie Sanders started, and you need to recognize that you fucked up in what you did with him. You need to root out all the corruption within the DNC. You need to get that gone. You need to start thinking radically, and you need to start thinking in a populist way. You need to reconnect with the working and lower middle class. You need to offer them something. You need to no longer be the establishment. You need to make differences, you need to make change, and you need to make a presentation of an alternative to the existing way things are done. Trump is going to fail, and he's going to fail hard. You need to try and avoid taking the blame for that. So obstruct, but you need to do it intelligently. You need to make the argument for why you're obstructing, why this is necessary, how bad the things he is trying to do are, should he even try to do any of them. You need to try and build some bridges across the gap. Some of you have common enemies now, a common enemy in Trump. Maybe you can build something from that and build this cross-party consensus that Obama kept trying and failing to get, but now maybe the more moderate wing of the Republican Party is willing to meet you halfway. You need to defeat the regressive left within your own bounds. You need to learn the lessons of Brexit and Trump's election, and you need to apply them. You need to reach out to people, not dismiss them, not shout them down as racist or misogynist or whatever else when they disagree with you, but listen and understand. You don't have to believe them, but if you want to persuade them, you have to know where they're coming from, and you have to attack those issues, the things that worry them. If they're worried about immigration, it's no good just going, racist! It's not going to persuade anyone. You need to explain to them and show them how immigration can be a good thing, or you need to find ways that are acceptable to you to limit it, to throw them a bone. Lots of people are worried they have issues with illegal immigration. They don't have an issue with immigration. They have an issue with illegal immigration. So find some way to deal with that, to offer people more legitimate ways into your country to seek their fortune, whatever. These are people who want to be there, who want to make the most of the opportunities that are presented to them. and that can help your economy, and that can help everyone. You need to tackle money in politics. You need to make that a central strut of anything that you're going to do. It has to be got rid of. Trump overthrew that, which shows that you can manage without the kind of money and corruption that everyone's used to in American politics. But his way of doing things is not sustainable, I don't think. It's not a model for the future. It's a unique Trumpian thing. So that's not going to work. So that's what you need to do. You need to clean house, you need to reassess, you need to reconnect, and you need to re-find that politics that will connect with the underclass, the lower class, and the lower middle class, because that's where Bernie would have won, quite honestly. Bernie would have wiped the floor with Trump quite considerably, and you've really fucked yourselves over by not choosing him, and by the way in which you did it. You disenfranchised so many of your own supporters. You made people reluctant to vote for your candidate. It's not the only reason, but it's a big reason. It's a big reason you lost. So there's a lot to do, a lot of work for you to do, a lot of work for us over here with our own problems to do. So good luck to everyone in the world. Silver linings, I suppose. We're less likely to go to war with Russia. Comedians have more material. So no Armageddon, more comedy. It's not all bad, is it? I apologise for the noise in the background. There's some gardening going on, but I'm off to a mini convention this afternoon, so I don't really have time to re-record or sort anything out. So I won't see you guys again until Monday, most likely. So peace and love to you and yours. I'm off to lose myself in some gaming for the weekend, and maybe even run an assassinate Trump scenario, even though I think it's a bad idea. And I'll see you, provided the world hasn't bloomed into nuclear fire, on Monday. Zang!
Stop.